We spent the summer of 1976 meeting in each other's homes and discussing what kind of an organization we would form. We knew it would be a nonprofit and how to attract our first members, etc. We spent a long time in designing our mission statement and coming up with goals and objectives. And another very important person in that group was Katie Hart McLean. Now, Katie Hart was attractive, full of charisma, full of spirit. You never forgot Katie when you met her, and she was just the perfect spokesperson for the organization in those early years when we were considered by many in the community as being sort of a controversial crowd. The very first thing we did was to have a walking tour of the Prospect Armada neighborhood. We chose that neighborhood specifically because it was endangered, because there was discussions about demolishing that neighborhood as well. And it was a neighborhood that was filled with some really spectacular homes. A lot of them were revival homes from the 20s, but also some green and greens, a beautiful, beautiful neighborhood. And so we had our first walking tour, and the first 250 people who came on that walking tour became our first members. We also had a gathering of all of our friends that we could think of who we thought might be interested in historic preservation and starting this organization, and had a reception in our backyard. And at that time, we asked people who were interested in participating on the board to raise their hands and to go into our living room where they could have their first board meeting. And that's exactly how our first board was formed, much to my surprise as I look back on that now. But we ended up with a great board and a group of very committed people. And maybe Bill can comment on that because he was one of the members who went into our living room.
Yes, looking back, I wondered, I wonder how my life would have been different had I not raised my hand and entertained the invitation to go into the living room, because it's now 35 years ago and 35 years of continuous involvement with Pasadena Heritage. And we need to remember that 1976 was the bicentennial year.
That's right.
So many people, many more people perhaps then, were focused on history and historical backgrounds, either from where they came from or where they had landed here in Pasadena. It was just kind of a wonderful time, and we were, of course, much younger then and much more enthusiastic, and maybe the other term is idealistic, or we might not have launched what has not always been peaches and cream for the last 35 years, but Pasadena Heritage obviously has survived and has become stronger as we've been tempered through all the ups and downs of the historic preservation challenges that have existed and continue to exist in the community. I think, and I frequently say this to people, I think we had an idea that we could, master all of this in a few short years, and yet, these issues, or the type of issues that were present then, have never gone away. They've just come back to us in other garb, other developers, other bad ideas about development and things like that.
We were certainly looked upon in those days as obstructionists, and many people were concerned because we were sort of changing the focus of the city at that point in time. And there was grave concern about, also on the part of some of the property owners, that we would be involved in their private property rights, and that maybe we were interfering with that.
And Sue referred to the Pasadena Museum of History, which was previously known as the Pasadena Historical Society, and I'm afraid that we were early on castigated as the Pasadena Hysterical Society.
And that name still comes up from time to time.
Indeed it does, and I think maybe sometimes it's tongue-in-cheek, or I hope it is.
Maybe sometimes it's true.
Yes, maybe so.
I thought maybe my recollection of on the one hand, the unbelievably excellent choices made by those founders, contrasted with the very primitive nature of this organization when I first joined it. And I was actually very attracted by the fact that it was an outspoken troublemaker group. That's what appealed to me in the beginning. But we had amazing talent. We had lawyers who crafted the articles and bylaws that have really stood the test of time. We had creative minds that came up with our 3 A's of historic preservation: awareness, assistance, and action. And those have been our catchwords for all these years, and in fact have been adopted by other organizations, including the LA Conservancy that was founded the year after Pasadena Heritage. We also, the collective we, I wasn't there then, decided that a very professional look for the organization was important, and among those founding board members was a very talented graphic designer who made our newsletter and our letterhead and our business cards look very official, even though our office at the time was in Katie Harp's trunk of her car or dining room table. And very early in the organization's history, an executive director was hired, which was highly unusual to have a staff for a very small nonprofit group. And her name was Stephanie Reeser, and she was trained at Columbia and came here to the West Coast and became our first staff person within, I think, 2 years of the founding of Pasadena Heritage, while we still kept track of income and expenses on a yellow pad. And our membership records were a Rolodex with people's names in them. And we had one telephone and no copy machine, but we looked like we were a very professional organization.
The times were really different, however, that there were historic preservation organizations across the country, particularly in the South and the Northeast, that were very successful. But elsewhere in the country, they were few and far between. And in California, there was an organization in San Francisco Architectural Heritage, and we did go up and talk with them because that was the only model that we really had nearby. But somebody advised us to call the Office of Historic Preservation, so I remember one day calling up there, and next thing I knew is that the State Historic Preservation Officer, Knox Mellon, was on the line saying, "Oh, you're starting an organization, you'd like to get going? Well, I'll be down next week to meet with you." And in addition, we connected with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. They had a Western Regional Office, and we had the opportunity of becoming involved in several of the statewide conferences and playing a role, including having one here, even though we were a very young organization. But that helped us. We learned a lot as we went. We learned that there was so much to this world of historic preservation, even really beyond our borders, and we gradually, little by little, were getting educated.